In the abyss between dying suns, where light itself was strangled by the weight of eternity, the warp began to convulse. Its endless storms, usually the dominion of demons and dreams, twisted upon themselves in a seizure of light and terror. Across the black ocean of madness, something alien asterisk to its nature moved, not corruption, but purity made furious. The Empyrean, that roiling realm of screaming thought, recoiled like a wounded god, and in that recoil the storm was born. Lightning, white as the bones of angels, carved its way through the screaming ether. It was not warp lightning, no psychic storm or demonic fire. It was older, primordial, the kind of lightning that once split the skis of a younger universe when gods still walked among men, and the concept of asterisk faith had yet to harden into dogma. Each bolt carried memory of cold mountains under a sky of endless aurorae, of voices raised in songs of war and honor. The warp, built upon the thoughts and fears of mortals, could not comprehend it. It screamed. The rift widened, tearing through the fabric of unreality. The astronomican beacon of the Emperor's will shuddered as its eternal light flickered like a candle in a hurricane. Across Terra, the choir of 1,000 psychers convulsed, blood streaming from their eyes as visions poured through their minds. A sky set aflame with blue fire, a hammer descending through storm and void, a shadow of divinity unbound by the Imperium's creed. Through that rent in creation, something descended, not a demon, not a primarch, something different, something that remembered being divine. The first to see it were not men, but the drifting machine shrines of Mars that circled the void near the maelstrom. Their sensors detected impossible readings, a surge of energy with no warp signature, no psychic resonance, no trace of chaos. It was asterisk pure, a term that to the Adeptus Mechanicus meant blasphemy. The data streams crackled, and the Magi screamed binary litanies of disbelief as the image took form, a hammer, vast and radiant, spiraling through the void like a fallen star. Its head was forged from metal that did not exist in their periodic prayers, its haft engraved with runes that defied translation. Every lightning flash around it carried whispers in tongues older than the stars. Mjolnir. When it struck the boundary between reality and the warp, the galaxy itself trembled. The shockwave was felt on 1,000 worlds, from the hive towers of Necromunda to the blackened vaults of Cadia's grave. Astropaths fainted mid-chant, their souls scorched by echoes of thunder that had never known the Emperor's light. On the battlefields of Armageddon, storm clouds gathered without reason. On holy Terra, the custodes looked to the skies, silent, sensing the tremor ripple through the psychic lattice of humanity. The rift became a wound, bleeding lightning instead of fire, and from it emerged a figure. He was not shaped by the warp's madness, he defied it. Each pulse of his presence unmade corruption, burning it away in searing arcs of thunderlight. The demons that dared to crawl near screamed as their forms melted into ash and static. He fell through the breach like a comet wrapped in storm, his descent leaving scars of lightning across the void. Around him swirled fragments of memory, halls of gold, the laughter of gods, the whisper of an All-Father's name. The Imperium itself, that eternal chorus of chaos and despair, howled a single word. Asgard. And then the silence broke. Reality shuddered as his form breached the materium. The rift collapsed behind him with a thunderclap that shattered a dozen nearby worlds' atmosphere. For an instant, the void was lit brighter than any sun. Then darkness reclaimed it. Drifting debris from shattered asteroids glowed faintly, charged by energy that could not be classified. In their static hum, the faintest echo of thunder lingered, as though reality itself remembered being struck. He fell toward a world long abandoned, its surface cracked and barren, its name lost in forgotten administratum archives. Once, it had been a shrine world. Now it was a grave. But as the hammer's trail of fire crossed the planet's dead skis, the machines of war still roamed its surface, remnants of the endless conflict between those who called themselves angels of death and those who worshipped the dark. Before he struck ground, a storm unfurled across the planet's hemisphere. Clouds of iron and fire collided, birthing lightning that turned night into white. The storm obeyed him, not physics. Wind became his herald, thunder his choir. When he finally fell, he struck the crust with the force of a meteor, carving a crater miles wide. From within the crater came a single flash of light, and then silence again. For 3 days the storm raged. Vox signals across nearby sectors turned to static. Warp travel failed. Even the ordos of the Inquisition felt its tremor, a distortion in the weave of reality that bore no signature of chaos, but something far more unnerving, divinity uncorrupted. When at last the clouds parted, Mechanicus probes returned data that the Magi refused to believe. The storm had cleared, and at its center stood a figure, tall, broad-shouldered, armored not in ceramite but in light and ancient metal. The crater steamed around him, molten rock cooling beneath his boots. In his hand, the hammer still burned with lightning that no science could measure. He lifted his gaze to the dark horizon, where the broken spires of a forgotten cathedral reached toward him like pleading hands. Statues of saints and angels lay shattered, their faces erased by time. Above them, a torn Imperial aquila hung by a single rusted chain, creaking in the wind. He said nothing, but when lightning flickered again, it illuminated his face, eyes like storms over endless seas, a jaw set in remembrance of battles older than this galaxy. The wind whispered his name, not from the air but from memory itself. The warp still trembled, echoing it. The world below was already dying before he arrived. Once, it had been a bastion of faith, a shrine world of the segmentum obscurus, where pilgrims once walked in endless processions toward cathedrals that scraped the heavens. Now those cathedrals were husks of glass and ruin, their stained windows shattered by bolt or fire, their relics buried beneath ash. The planet's name had been purged from imperial record after it fell to the slow rot of heresy, reclaimed only by war. The air was poison, the skies aflame, and into that burning chaos fell the god of storms. The armies that fought upon its surface were already deaf to reason. Angels of the Imperium, the Adeptus Astartes, waged an endless siege against traitors who bore the 8-pointed star of the damned. The ground itself was split by the weight of their conflict, craters filled with molten rock, trenches choked with bodies. Cities reborn as tombs. It was there, amid the thunder of bolters and the shriek of chain blades, that the heavens screamed and split open. At first, both sides mistook it for orbital bombardment, another punishment from a vengeful fleet above. But no orbital lance ever sounded like that. The noise was deeper, more ancient, as if the world's very bones were groaning. Lightning fell not from clouds but from the fabric of reality itself, spiraling through the sky in veins of blue-white fury. Then came the light, pure and terrible, flooding the atmosphere, bleaching the battlefield into negative shadow. Through that light something fell. The impact was cataclysmic. Shockwaves flattened entire battalions, vaporizing what little structure remained of the front lines. The sky burned with plasma, turning clouds into boiling seas of white fire. Vox channels exploded with static. The Astartes, veterans of 1,000 wars, fell to their knees as the storm passed through them, not as heat, but as asterisk presence asterisk. They felt it in their hearts, in the gene seed that tied them to their god-emperor. It was not psychic energy. It was not sorcery. It was the asterisk divine asterisk. When the light faded, the battlefield was silent. Even the air seemed afraid to move. And then, from the smoking crater, he rose. He stood taller than any mortal, yet not monstrous. The aura around him bent the ash and light, as if reality were struggling to define his form. His armor was unlike any seen in the galaxy, not forged by human hands, nor grown in the hell forges of the warp. It gleamed like liquid metal, marked by runes that shifted with the rhythm of thunder. Lightning danced over his shoulders, whispering in languages older than Terra. In his right hand he carried the hammer, its surface pulsing with the quiet heartbeat of a star. The nearest warriors, iron hands and their corrupted kin alike, could not comprehend what they saw. For a brief, impossible instant, both sides lowered their weapons. The traitor sergeants hissed prayers to dark gods, believing a new demon prince had emerged from the warp. The loyalists fell to one knee, their augmetic eyes overloaded by divine radiance, hearts caught between awe and terror. Then the first of them fired. A plasma bolt screamed through the air, striking his chest with the power to melt ceramic. It dispersed, not deflected, not absorbed, simply unmade. Thor turned, his gaze falling upon the traitor who had fired. In that instant, the corrupted warrior's armor cracked, his flesh burning from within. Lightning flared outward like wings, searing the ground to glass. The bolt's echo rolled across the field, shaking the ruins of the old cathedral nearby. And thus the storm began. Bolter fire erupted from both sides, a chaos of fear and fury. But against the storm god, their weapons meant nothing. Lightning arced between barrels, burning the ammunition before it fired. Chain blades shattered in the hands of those who swung them. When he moved, the world seemed to move with him. Each step left molten earth and the faint afterimage of runes that glowed before fatting. He swung the hammer once, just once. It struck the air, and the air itself screamed. The sound carried across miles, collapsing Gothic towers and silencing the combat entirely. The shockwave was so pure, so absolute, that the corrupted fell to their knees, blood leaking from the seals of their armor. Even the loyalists recoiled, unable to endure the purity of its force. Yet amidst that terror, the Space Marines felt something else, something unfamiliar: recognition. For they had known war their entire existence, and here was war made flesh, but not as they understood it. Not the grim inevitability of the Imperium's endless crusades, not the bloodlust of chaos, but the honor of battle, the purity of struggle untainted by despair. To them, it felt like a memory their species had long forgotten, the echo of what humanity once believed gods should be. The god of storms stood in the center of ruin and looked up. The black clouds parted at his will, revealing stars glimmering faintly beyond the upper atmosphere. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and for the first time since his fall through the warp, spoke. His voice was low, resonant, carrying through the dust and silence like the tolling of an ancient bell. The Vox units of the surviving Marines captured fragments of his words, not in low Gothic, not in any human tongue, but in something older, akin to the sound of thunder rolling through valleys of ice. Translators would later try to render it into meaning. The closest approximation they found was this: "Where is the Father of men?" It was not a demand. It was recognition, as if the divine in him had sensed another god's echo on this world. Then silence again. The storm began to subside, leaving the battlefield drenched in ozone and blood. The Astartes regrouped slowly, unsure whether they had witnessed salvation or apocalypse. The traitor forces fled into the wastes, muttering oaths to gods suddenly made small. Thor stood alone amid the ruin, lightning crawling down the haft of his hammer, his gaze cast toward the distant void. His presence lingered in the air, neither holy nor profane, simply inevitable. And high above, aboard ships of the Imperial Navy, augurs traced the storm's signature: energy beyond any known classification, radiating not corruption but creation. In their confusion, they recorded one final note before their systems burned out. Phenomenon consistent with manifestation-level event. Classification unknown. Possible Primarch-level anomaly. But the Emperor's sons were long dead or lost. *3. The Imperium trembles. 940 words. The ripples began at the edge of perception, faint disturbances in the psychic current that bound the Imperium's fractured soul. But ripples became waves, and waves became screams. Across the endless night of the galaxy, astropaths convulsed mid-chant, their eyes seared white as their minds were pierced by a single radiant vision. A man wreathed in lightning, his hammer blazing brighter than suns, standing upon a corpse world that refused to stay dead. On Terra, within the Golden Throne's shadow, the Astronomicon faltered. For less than a second, its holy beacon, the Emperor's light that guided the vessels of mankind through the warp, dimmed. Only a fraction, a flicker, but enough for ships across the segmentum solar to lose their course and crash against the tides of the Imperium. The choir of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica screamed as one. Thousands of psychers burst into flame, their ashes falling like black snow upon the marble floors of their sanctum. And yet, for a heartbeat, before death took them, many spoke the same word, a name that did not belong to any saint or demon in Imperial record. Thor. High Lords of Terra convened in panic. The Adeptus Mechanicus locked their vaults and purged data archives to conceal the anomaly detected by their deep space augurs. Across the ecclesiarchy, sermons turned into interrogations. Who was this radiant god who moved outside the emperor's shadow? Was he a herald or a rival? On Ophelia VII, seat of the ecclesiarch's throne, a conclave of cardinals gathered in the cathedral of Saint Sabbat. The air stank of incense and fear. Choirs chanted the litany of denial, but their hymns faltered as the walls trembled with distant thunder, thunder with no storm. "Brothers," intoned Cardinal Vorton, his voice echoing through the vaulted chamber, "we face an apparition of divine magnitude. Our prophets dream of lightning crowned in gold, of cathedrals shattering beneath holy storm. Some among the sororitas claim to have seen him in prayer, not in the emperor's likeness, but as a god of thunder." Murmurs spread like plague. Some wept, others crossed themselves in desperate piety. Cardinal Joran, oldest among them, slammed his staff upon the marble. "There is no god but the emperor," he hissed. "Anything else is heresy. This Thor is a false light, a test of faith, sent by the archtraitor himself." But another voice rose, trembling yet clear. "And yet, my lord, he burns the servants of chaos to ash with a glance. No demon obeys him. No warp taint clings to his name. What heretic wields purity as a weapon?" The chamber erupted into argument. Some demanded crusade, others worship. The schism spread faster than flame. On more than one shrine world, pilgrims turned their eyes to the sky, praying not to the emperor but to the storm. The ecclesiarchy reacted with swift brutality. Entire sectors were put to the torch. Worlds that dared whisper the thunder god's name were declared apostate. Priests were executed mid-sermon. But the fires could not burn fast enough. Faith had already taken root. Across the Imperium scattered hives and manufactorums, soldiers swore oaths in secret to the asterisk Skyfather, reborn asterisk. The Inquisition took notice. Inquisitor Malech Vane of the Ordo Hereticus arrived upon the dying world where the god had fallen. His ship descended through perpetual lightning, vox channels snarling with static. As he stepped onto the scorched earth, his retinue, psychers, assassins, and tech priests felt the hum in the air. The storm never ceased. It was as if the planet itself breathed thunder. "Report," Vane ordered, his voice filtered through rebreather vox. A servitor stuttered in binary. "Unknown entity, energy readings beyond Mechanica scale, residual radiation pattern non-psychic. The warp avoids this place." That last phrase chilled even Vane's corrupted blood. Avoids. The warp asterisk never asterisk avoided anything. It devoured, corrupted, consumed, but here the air was empty of its whispers. Even the shadows felt clean. In the crater's heart he found it. A mark burned into the rock, vast as a fortress, a rune of lightning carved by impact, still glowing faintly. No machine could identify the material residue. It was as if the stone itself had been rewritten. "Record it," Vane whispered. "Purge it after." But even as he spoke, his sanctioned psyker convulsed, eyes rolling white. "He is not gone," the psyker gasped, his voice distorted, echoing like a storm through the vox. "He walks. He walks among the stars. He carries the hammer, and the hammer remembers everything it has ever destroyed." Lightning struck nearby, hurling the retinue to the ground. When they rose, the psyker was ash. Within days, Vane's report reached Terra, a coded message of fear disguised as faith. He named the being not God, nor Xenos, but phenomenon incarnate. His words were buried by the administratum, but not before they spread through the inquisitorial archives like a contagion. If the emperor is man's god made flesh, then this is nature made divine. Beyond Terra, the stars themselves began to change. Warp storms grew restless, as though the Imperium itself sensed the intruder's presence. In some regions, the storms parted for the first time in millennia, allowing travel through once impassable routes. In others, they intensified, as if the gods of chaos sought to close their wounds. Fleet captains whispered of thunder rolling through the void, of lightning striking in the darkness between systems. Entire patrols vanished near the maelstrom, their last transmissions filled with static and the faint echo of laughter, not mocking, but noble, mournful, ancient. And across the imperial palace itself, in the still air of the Sanctum Imperialis, a custodian halted mid-step. He had heard something that no human ear could perceive, a distant rumble, soft yet resonant, like thunder rolling over eternity. In the silence that followed, a single candle guttered and died. From his eternal throne the emperor did not stir. His face remained locked in deathless serenity, his psychic light flickering faintly in the darkness. Yet somewhere within that decaying god-mind, an echo rippled recognition, old and deep. Far beyond the palace, lightning split the night sky above Terra's polluted heavens. No rain followed, only silence and the scent of ozone. The storm spread across the stars like a contagion of awe and defiance. Vox transmissions faltered, warp routes shivered into silence, and entire sectors began to dream of thunder. In the void, lightning flickered where there was no atmosphere to bear it, arcs of impossible energy leaping between dead moons and orbiting cathedrals. The Imperium, ever fearful of what it could not classify, reacted as it always had, with fire. The High Lords of Terra issued an edict of absolute silence. The name of the storm god was stricken from all records, his symbol declared heretical. Orders were sent to every chapter, every fleet, every inquisitorial conclave. The Imperium would not worship this being, it would erase him. And thus came the wrath of mortals. An entire crusade was declared under the guise of purification, the Tempest Exterminatus. Dozens of chapters were mobilized. Among them marched the Ultramarines, the Black Templars, and the zealous fanatics of the Red Hunters, those whose faith was not merely unshakable, but weaponized. They came not as diplomats or supplicants, but as executioners. Their ships tore through the void in burning formation, each a cathedral of hatred and holy purpose. The fleet's banners bore the sigil of the Inquisition, its vox choruses reciting psalms of annihilation. They followed the storm's trail, the unnatural warp stillness that rippled behind Thor's passage through the galaxy. His very presence left silence in the immaterium, a void that could be traced like a wound. When the fleets reached the world known as Calthrin IX, they found it already transformed. Once a barren mining colony, now it was alive with lightning. Every mountain peak glowed with arcs of light. Rivers of molten glass flowed through canyons where his hammer had struck. The air shimmered, heavy with the charge of creation. And at the center of it all, upon a plateau of stone carved smooth by wind and power, he stood motionless, watching the heavens as if awaiting judgment. The crusade descended in fire. Drop pods split the clouds, their re-entry trails like falling comets. Thunderhawks followed, disgorging armored Astartes in waves of ceramite and faith. Vox channels filled with hymns, their binary choirs rising in perfect unison. The atmosphere trembled with the combined rage of 10,000 zealots. When the first bolter round was fired, the storm answered. Lightning fell like judgment. The earth convulsed, mountains split. The Astartes advanced through the chaos, their armor scorched by plasma and flame. Yet the god did not move. Bolts struck him and vanished, dissolving into arcs of harmless light. He regarded them as one might regard waves breaking upon a cliff. Then finally he spoke. The Vox systems across the entire fleet crackled, bursting with interference. His voice rolled across every frequency, resonating through iron, bone, and soul alike. It was not language, it was vibration, elemental and primal. But to those who heard it, understanding came unbidden, carried not by words but by the weight of asterisk meaning. "You fight for a corpse," the voice said, not in contempt but in sorrow. "You kill in his name, yet you have forgotten his light." And with that he raised the hammer. The storm erupted. Chainswords ignited, roaring against the wind. The Astartes charged, unwavering, their training immune to fear. Lightning met steel, and for the first time in millennia, divinity clashed with devotion. A Black Templar chaplain, his crozius glowing with the Emperor's fury, led the assault. "By the throne, by the God Emperor, strike him down," he roared. Thor met him mid-strike. The crozius shattered against Mjolnir, sparks cascading like dying suns. The chaplain's armor disintegrated, his body consumed by a brilliance too pure to burn. Yet as he fell, his eyes reflected not terror but awe. The rest of the Astartes pressed on, undeterred. Their faith was not weakness, it was madness sanctified. Plasma fire streaked through the air, exploding against the god's aura. Melta beams turned sand to glass. But for every marine that advanced, 10 fell, struck down not by malice but by proximity to his power. Above, the orbiting fleets unleashed bombardment protocols. Cyclonic torpedoes screamed through the stratosphere, detonating in blinding crescendos. Each blast carved craters into the world's crust, sending shockwaves that reached the upper atmosphere. And still, amidst that planetary ruin, the storm god walked unbowed. His counterstrike was not rage but inevitability. Each swing of his hammer folded space, unmaking matter as effortlessly as breath dispels mist. When he brought it down upon the earth, tectonic plates groaned in agony. The sky tore open, and for an instant the void itself shone through. Within their ships, tech marines screamed as systems shorted. Power cores overloaded, machine spirits howling in terror. It was as if the laws of physics had bent in reverence to something older than themselves. Yet even then, mortals refused to yield. The ultramarines reorganized, deploying artillery in precise formation. The Black Templars pressed their suicidal charge. The Red Hunters unleashed psychers bound in iron sarcophagi, their minds tearing open in an attempt to drown the gods will beneath psychic interference. It was futile. Each burst of power only amplified the storm. Psychic energy, the warp's corruption, could not exist in the presence of what he was. Their souls burned clean as they screamed, leaving nothing but falling ash. When it was over, the plateau was gone, vaporized, transformed into a lake of molten light. The Crusade's survivors withdrew, their ships limping from orbit, scorched and crippled. Their Vox recordings were corrupted beyond repair, save for fragments of one final transmission. He does not seek conquest, he seeks balance. The storm does not hate the mountain, it only reminds it that even stone must bow. And yet the Imperium did not learn. To them, defeat was never evidence of error, only proof that greater force was needed. The Inquisition sealed the reports, calling the battle an engagement with Zeno's class anomaly. The ecclesiarchy proclaimed it a victory, though no world remained to witness it. But on that melted sphere, where no human would ever again walk, the hammer's imprint lingered, a crater shaped not like destruction, but like a symbol. And in the heart of that ruin, lightning still whispered softly across the surface, as if the storm had chosen to remember. For 10 millennia, the warp had known only its own reflection, an endless tempest of fear and desire, fed by mortal thought. It was the echo chamber of sentience, a sea of madness shaped by prayer, hatred, and despair. But now, a new sound rippled through its tides, a frequency alien to its nature. Not screaming, not laughter, not the delirium of chaos, but thunder. At first, the demons didn't understand it. They felt it as pain, not the agony of defeat, but the searing purity of being seen asterisk. The thunder's resonance passed through their forms like a holy contagion, unmaking the corruption that defined them. Across the Imperium, war hosts of nightmare beings burst apart into radiant vapor. The warp's eternal storms faltered for the first time in eons, uncertain, like predators blinking at sudden light. Then came the realization. The thunder did not belong to the emperor. It did not flow from the golden corpse on the throne, nor from any saint of his tortured cult. It came from something outside the lattice of mortal belief, from a realm that the warp had never touched, yet could now feel pressing against it. The Imperium trembled like a beast sensing a rival. And in their thrones of rotting thought and endless hunger, the four turned their gaze upon it. Khorne, the blood god, sat upon his mountain of skulls, the river of gore beneath his brass throne boiling with anticipation. He tasted the thunder and roared with savage laughter, shaking the very firmament of the warp. "Yes," he bellowed, voice echoing through eternity, "I know this song, the song of battle made pure, a warrior who fights not for indulgence nor chaos but for asterisk honor. Let him come. Let him strike me if he dares." Every skull in his mountain grinned wider at their master's rage. Yet even Khorne's glee carried a strange hesitation, a note of unease buried beneath the bloodlust. For the god of war could smell in that lightning something beyond rage, something divine. In the impossible palace of Tzinch, the architect of fate unfurled wings of burning paradox. His form shifted through 10,000 shapes, eyes and mouths blooming across his ever-changing body. He studied the storm with fascination, watching threads of causality fray and reform around it. "This is not one of mine," he hissed to himself, each voice contradicting the last. "A god without scheming, a power beyond corruption, impossible, and yet the patterns warp around him, unbound by my hand. He is a variable I cannot weave." For the first time in memory, Tzinch's laughter faltered. Far below in the garden of Nurgle, the Lord of Decay stirred amidst his plague blooms. His laughter was wet and slow, like the bubbling of rot through stagnant water. "Ah," he cooed, plucking a flower of bone and mucus from the soil, "how strange to see life that does not come from death. How lonely he must be, this thunder thing, wandering without sickness, without end." He pressed the flower to his withered face and sighed, exhaling clouds of contagion that refused to spread. Even the spores of corruption could not cross into the storm's light. Nurgle frowned, not in anger but in sorrow. "He does not belong here," the Plague Father murmured, "and yet he changes asterisk us." And in the most forbidden corner of the warp, the silken halls of Slaanesh quivered. The Dark Prince reclined upon a throne of sound and sensation, surrounded by demons whose every movement was a symphony of agony and ecstasy. For once, Slaanesh did not smile. Through the echoing corridors of lust and longing came the sound of thunder, not the crack of violence, but the purity of power without indulgence. For a heartbeat, even the god of pleasure felt envy. "Beauty," Slaanesh whispered, trembling, "true beauty, unmarred by excess." The Dark Prince's perfect face contorted in pain that was almost reverence. "How cruel that he walks among mortals, while I am trapped in this chorus of my own reflection." And so, for the first time in 10,000 years, the gods of chaos were silent. Their realms shuddered as the lightning crossed the Imperium again, tracing paths through unreality like veins of divine will. The warp recoiled, unable to consume it. The storm became a wound in its skin, leaking light instead of madness. Through that wound, faint shapes began to emerge, visions of a world not shaped by sin, but by purpose. In one corner of that dreaming sea, a demon prince screamed as lightning devoured his form. His last words echoed like a warning to all who served the ruinous powers. "He does not come to conquer the warp. He comes to judge it." The chaos gods stirred in their dominions, restless. For in Thor's arrival, they felt something they had long forgotten, not wrath, not rivalry, but fear. because the storm was not born from emotion as they were. It was not a reflection of mankind's weakness. It was not an echo of their creation. It was older. It came from before the warp, before mortals learned to dream, before souls learned to scream. It was the memory of the cosmos when it was young and still divine. And in that moment, as lightning cracked across the Imperium's infinite horizon, Khorne lifted his blade in challenge. "Come, Thunder Child," he roared. "Show me your strength. Let your purity bleed upon my altar." But Thor did not answer. Instead, his presence rolled through the warp like a storm over mountains, unstoppable, impersonal, indifferent. Where it passed, the howling of the damned grew quiet. The demons of the lesser pantheon fled into the darkness, their shapes unraveling in the wake of light. And in the silence that followed, only one sound remained, the slow, endless roll of thunder. Tzinch's crystal palace began to crack. Slaanesh's symphony fell off-key. Even Nurgle's garden wilted, its blossoms turning pale as the stormlight bled through. The chaos gods, those eternal architects of ruin, gazed upon the storm and saw something that no prophecy had foretold, something that did not belong to their cycle of creation and decay. A power beyond corruption, beyond mortal thought. And for the first time since the birth of the warp itself, the great powers whispered not in triumph or deceit, but in trembling awe. The galaxy slept uneasily beneath a bruised and broken sky. Across the void, worlds trembled as the silence between the stars was replaced by a slow, rolling thunder. It came not from cannons or warp drives, but from the atmosphere itself, as if the fabric of space had learned to breathe, and each breath was a storm. For the first time in living memory, lightning arced across the cold dark of the void, impossible, divine. It danced between shattered moons and burned through the dust of ancient wars, a cosmic pulse beating in rhythm with something vast and unseen. From the ruins of hive cities to the shattered decks of derelict void ships, mortals looked upward and felt it in their bones. The galaxy had entered a new age. No prophecy had foreseen it. No astropath could endure its sound. The Emperor's tarot cracked under its echo, the cards splitting like bark struck by lightning. In the palace upon Terra, the golden throne flickered for 7 heartbeats, a pause that froze the Mechanicus in collective terror. For 7 seconds, the Astronomicon dimmed beneath a surge of raw, unfiltered divinity. The thunder did not come from the Emperor's dying light. It came from somewhere far beyond, a source that no mortal mind could name, yet every living soul in the Imperium knew its name. Thor. The hammer that had split reality now rested at the center of the storm, immovable, radiant, and terrible in its serenity. It hung above the void, orbiting nothing, glowing with a light that refused the touch of the warp. Fleets sent to investigate vanished into silence. Their vox calls returned only the sound of wind and distant thunder. Some said they saw a figure within the maelstrom, standing upon the lightning itself, gazing down at the endless, broken galaxy below. Rumors spread faster than plague. On shrine worlds, the ecclesiarchy declared the storm a test, the emperor's judgment, sent to purge the faithless. Millions of zealots marched into the tempests, their flesh flayed by wind and lightning, their prayers echoing into nothing. On forge worlds, tech priests gathered in silence before their dying machines, whispering in static tongues about an energy that defied all known science, a power older than the machine god himself. But there were others, quiet voices in the dark, heretics perhaps, who spoke of the thunder not as judgment but as *mercy. They claimed that the god who had come was not one of the emperor's rivals, nor a demon, nor a Xeno's abomination. He was something else, something ancient enough to remember when gods still walked beside mortals without feeding upon their souls. Something that had returned to remind the galaxy what divinity truly was. And yet the storm did not discriminate. It tore through chaos strongholds and imperial bastions alike. It erased heretics and holy men without preference. It devoured warfleets and hive spires, leveled mountains and cities, leaving behind only silence and the faint scent of ozone. In the eye of terror, even the warp recoiled. The rifts that had once spewed demons into real space flickered like dying embers. The eye's crimson glare dimmed, as if staring back at something that could see it in return. Worlds long lost to chaos found themselves suddenly still. No whispers, no nightmares, only the distant roll of divine thunder echoing across eternity. Within that stillness, the gods of the warp turned their eyes away. Even Korn's rivers of blood calmed to a murmur. Tzeentch's labyrinth ceased shifting. Nurgle's laughter quieted into a sigh. Slaanesh's symphonies became silence. They watched, uncertain, as Thor's storm redefined the boundary between faith and power. The Thunder God had not come to claim worship. He did not ask for temples, prayers, or oaths. His mere asterisk presence was the sermon, a reminder that strength need not come from corruption, that divinity need not feed upon fear. In the Grimdark of the 41st millennium, that idea alone was heresy enough to shatter empires. And shatter they did. The High Lords of Terra fought to contain the truth, branding the storm an unholy phenomenon, a demonic deception. But their lies cracked beneath the weight of awe. Entire planetary systems turned away from the ecclesiarchy, abandoning the emperor's cult to follow the lightning in the sky. They called themselves the *** children of the hammer ***, and they spoke of a coming reckoning, a final war between gods, where only the worthy would stand beneath the storm unbroken. The Inquisition burned millions in their attempt to halt the spread. But for every world purged, 3 more raised their banners in Thunder's name. In the distant void, the Astartes watched with suspicion and reverence alike. Some among them, veterans of 1,000 crusades, claimed they had seen the figure of a man walking through the clouds above the battlefield, wreathed in electricity, eyes bright as suns. None dared name him aloud. And yet in hidden chambers, whispers passed among the most faithful. Perhaps the emperor did not die upon his throne. Perhaps he walks again, reborn as the storm. But the truth was far older and far stranger. The thunder was not the emperor's resurrection. It was the universe remembering what it had once been, a place of gods and mortals sharing breath, not domination. A place where storms were not omens of death, but proof of life's defiance against the void. Somewhere deep within the tempest, a hammer waited, not abandoned, not idle, waiting. Its haft gleamed with runes of creation. Its head pulsed with a heartbeat that could not be measured in mortal time. The lightning that surrounded it was not chaos, but language, the pure, ancient syntax of divinity itself. A promise written in light and storm. All wars end where the storm begins. And in the final silence between thunderclaps, a single voice echoed through the warp and real space alike, calm, cold, eternal. When gods forget their purpose, the storm remembers. Across the galaxy, armies fell still. Demons vanished into vapor. The Mechanicus prayers faltered. Even the Astronomicon, that eternal light of mankind, bowed beneath the storm's brilliance, flickering in reverence. The *age of storms had come. Empires would burn. Faiths would crumble. Even the emperor himself, should he still dream upon his throne, would one day awaken to meet the thunder. And when that day came, when lightning and golden light met above the dying galaxy, none could say whether it would be salvation or the end. For now only the storm spoke. And its voice was the sound of creation remembering itself.